Greetings, my name is Soraya Cuesta and I'm the Director of International Students at Miami-Dade College North Campus. Today we have the privilege to have the Honorable Christofer Burger, Consul General of Germany in Miami, discussing the topic of energy and climate change. Joining me in this conversation is Professor Leon Palombo from the Department of World Languages. This conversation is part of the Building Global Leaders International Environmental Series and in collaboration with the Center for the Advancement of Language and Cultural Studies in the Department of World Language. Welcome, Consul General. It's a pleasure to have you here at Miami-Dade College North Campus.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Yes, and the topic is climate change. So, climate change is affecting every nation, as you know. And the question that I have for you is, what are the key initiatives Germany is currently undertaking to combat climate change?
Well, thank you very much for the question. So, to combat climate change, basically the science is very clear on what we need to do, because the reason for climate change, the driver of climate change, is that there's too much carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And that carbon dioxide is in the atmosphere because for the last 150 years, humans have been burning lots and lots of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas. So the short answer is, what are we doing? We're trying to stop burning fossil fuels. Obviously, that is a very complicated and complex operation because so much of our economy, so much of our society for the last decades has depended on those sources of energy. But we are taking really significant steps to completely phase out the use of fossil fuels until 2045. And we're already making some decent progress. So for instance, this year Germany has become the first major industrial nation to produce 60% of its electricity from renewable sources. Obviously, there's still a lot more to do. Electricity, as I said, 60%, yes, but there are also other sectors of the economy that still use a lot of fossil fuels that are not connected to electricity. In Germany, one huge sector of energy consumption is heating for buildings in the winter. And obviously there's also the big sector of transportation, which means we need to get the cars, the trucks that are on our streets away from burning gasoline or diesel and to other sources of energy. So we're working very, very seriously on all of these fronts. We're making big investments in renewable energy, in electrifying our transportation networks, in creating heating systems that do not depend on fossil fuels, such as heat pumps, geothermal energy. We are developing and deploying energy storage solutions to be able to get through the winter where there's not enough sunlight in Germany to produce solar energy. So we're investing very heavily in creating a hydrogen infrastructure, because hydrogen is one of the possibilities for storing huge quantities of energy. But at the same time, doing all of that in Germany and getting our own carbon emissions to zero by 2045 is not enough, because Germany only represents 2% of the world's carbon emission. And since we're talking about climate change and not the changing weather in Germany, since we're talking about global warming, it's a global problem, and it will only get better if we get the whole world on board for this and everybody does their own share in bringing down worldwide carbon emissions. So we're also very actively engaged in global diplomacy to get other nations on board and to help nations that do not yet have the technological capability themselves, that lack the resources to transform their own electricity or their own energy networks to renewable sources, and help them achieve that same transformation. And we think there's a huge opportunity there for many countries to basically leapfrog through innovation, and instead of going through a phase of fossil-led industrialization, go straight to a system based on renewable clean energy, and create the kind of electrical grid you need to do that, and basically skip the stage of development where you have to pay huge quantities of money to oil-producing countries, which we have been doing for decades, and go straight to the point where that's just simply no longer needed.
Welcome, Consul, again to
Thank
our
you
campus.
So much,
so kind of piggybacking on what you were saying, can you discuss any recent successes or milestones Germany has achieved in reducing greenhouse gas emissions? Like, I know you gave some examples, but any other milestones that you can think of that Germany is doing to reduce these gas emissions?
So I just mentioned the figure of 60% of our electricity that is now coming from renewable sources, wind, solar, a little bit of hydro, and also a little bit of biomass, which is an important component because those are the components that are not dependent on daily weather conditions. But if you look at the carbon emissions themselves, 2023 was actually a very successful year where our emissions dropped by 10% so in just 1 year. Now, to be very honest, that is not just a result of the planned transformation of our economy that we're pursuing. It is also a result of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, which meant a complete disruption for the way the energy system in Europe used to work. Until 2022, Germany would get 55% of its natural gas from Russia. And within 3 months, we had to bring that to zero. And obviously that has been a very disruptive development that brought energy prices to skyrocket all over Europe and really all over the world, but especially in Germany. And so part of the reduction in climate emissions that we have seen are also an effect of the fact that energy has become or became so expensive for a while due to the war that certain very energy intensive industries simply had to go out of business for a while. So, you know, I want to be very transparent with this because there's really no point in presenting it as an easier thing than it is. Yes, it is a very hard and long-term transformation. So as I said, our goal is to reach net zero by 2045. It's not something where you just flick a switch. You have to invest in many different sectors of the economy, but we're doing it. And so last year, for the first time, basically since the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Climate Agreements were signed, Germany has actually achieved its reduction path. So we are now on track to reduce our emissions by 65% until 2030. So just a little more than 5 years from now, we will have reduced our emissions by 65%, which I think is really significant.
Renewable energy is often referred as green energy because it's more environmentally friendly. So what role does renewable energy play in Germany's climate strategies? And what are the future plans for expanding its use? I know that you have mentioned a little bit of it, but can you tell us more?
Renewable energy really is front and center in the effort to combat climate change, because if we no longer want to use fossil fuels, we have to stop burning coal and oil in order to not put more carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. Then where else are we going to get the energy from? The good news is we're getting it for free. We're getting it from the wind and we're getting it from the sun that is present in our nature anyway. So Germany has really invested very heavily over the last decades already, especially in solar and also in wind. Right now, really there are 3 places in the world that are leading the expansion of renewable energies, and it's China, which is by leaps and bounds the biggest producer of renewable energy and is fast expanding. And then it's Germany and it's Texas, interestingly. These are the 3 places where renewable energy is growing at the fastest pace. But really all over the world, right now, 85% of new power plants that are being built are renewables. So I think as a world, in the world as a whole, even independently of different ideological predispositions, people are just recognizing there's good money to be made from this clean energy. The sun and the wind, they don't bill you. So for us, as I said, it's not just that we're creating energy that is more environmentally friendly and that won't destroy our planet. It's also that we're no longer paying billions of dollars every year to Russia, which is a good thing. So we are on a path to expand solar and wind, most specifically, and we will increase our solar energy capacity about tenfold by 2045. That's going to be a total installed capacity of about 400 gigawatts. And at the same time, we want to increase our wind energy production about fourfold until 2045. That's very ambitious. In solar, we're on track to reach those numbers. In wind, we still have to accelerate the deployment of wind farms, which is obviously logistically a very ambitious process. But we know that we have the resources to do it. We know where to deploy them. And to some degree, actually a lot of additional capacity can be created by repowering existing wind plants. So technological progress has been so fast in this that we're on the same spot where 5 years ago you had a 1 megawatt wind turbine. In that same spot, you can now, just by upgrading the technology, install, say, a 4 gigawatt windmill. So repowering will be a huge part of that increase, but then also it's the increase of offshore wind energy, which has huge potential in Germany and in many other places of the world too, and which obviously, because it's an engineering challenge, it takes the development times are much longer because you're installing big machinery in the middle of the ocean. So it takes a lot of planning, it takes a lot of preparation, but we also have the plans to do it.
So, Consul, you were talking about, I know you began talking about global climate change and how that is affecting everyone. What are the main challenges Germany, you would say, faces in its climate change mitigation efforts, and how is it addressing them?
First of all, obviously, it's a matter of working against inertia. Every kind of change on such a huge scale, obviously you have to get millions and millions of people involved because, it affects people's homes. If you tell people you have to stop burning oil to heat your house, you have to tell them what to do instead, and you have to make it affordable to them to replace their oil heating with, say, a heat pump. So that is a huge challenge that we're tackling, we're addressing, and we're doing with quite a variety of different strategies. And obviously the same holds true for transportation, where people have been used to driving gasoline cars for 100 years now.
Yes.
And electric cars are amazing. I love driving an electric car, and I never want to go back to a gasoline car, but they work a little differently, and you need to get used to it. So creating that acceptance over time is obviously a challenge. And then like any big economic transformation, the move away from fossil fuels has winners and it also has losers. So, for instance, in Germany, we have 2 regions where coal mining is still an important economic factor that employs a lot of people. So, if you want to stop mining and burning coal, then you have to provide alternative livelihoods to these people that have been working in the sector. And obviously that's something that's very hard to do if you do it at short notice. If you say we're going to close the mine next year, then it will be very hard in a region that has for centuries been been focused on that particular industry to adapt to that. But if you do it with advanced planning, if you say we're going to wind down production of coal in this region over the next, say, 15 or 20 years, then it basically means that you can do it more or less without layoffs, because you can just have people retire and not replace them in the mines. And you have plenty of time to create alternative sources of livelihood. You can create colleges where people can train to work in other industries that have a future.
Yeah.
And so I think being able to bring everyone in those regions on board, creating a consensus on that sort of long-term transformation where people feel their concerns are being taken seriously and there's a perspective for a better future for them. That's not just, we're shutting down the mine and, see for yourselves how you adapt and possibly move away to the next city. No, we're going to create something beautiful, something, where it's worth living in that place. Because we have thought about it in advance, and there's a future for those regions.
And to create the infrastructure also that is necessary to continue with that change.
Yeah.
Now, developing countries are key to global climate action. Can you provide examples of how Germany is helping developing countries tackle climate change?
Yeah. So actually developing countries are to some degree facing very similar problems that we're facing. For instance, we have a cooperation with South Africa that is going through exactly the same question that I just described in Germany about how to transform the economy of a region that has heavily depended on coal mining, and how to provide people whose livelihoods so far depended on coal mining and give them an alternative. And at the same time, many developing countries also have electrical grids that are much less robust than the ones that we have in Germany, for instance. So in order to be able to cope with solar and wind, big quantities of solar and wind energy where production fluctuates with the weather, they need to be able to upgrade their electrical grids. So with South Africa and a couple of other countries, for instance, Indonesia, Vietnam, Senegal, as the G7 group of countries, we have created what's called JETPs. JETP stands for Just Energy Transition Partnership, whereby these countries commit to decarbonizing their energy sector, and in return they get support from the international community to, for instance, develop alternative livelihoods, develop their electrical grids, promote investment in renewable energies, and we feel that these partnerships have been extremely successful. They create a situation where it's no longer industrialized countries and developing countries shouting at each other, you need to do this, you need to do that, but it's an actual partnership where everybody feels their particular situation is taken into account. And we realize that to a big degree we're actually facing the same challenges and we can learn from each other.
That's true. Yes, definitely.
And what are the economic impacts of Germany's climate policies, both positive and negative? You can talk a little bit about that.
So on the positive side, we have created about 1.5 million clean economy jobs in Germany over the past decade. So there's a whole new sector of the economy based on these new technologies that help us not only save our planet off, but also be energy independent. I mentioned another factor. We're no longer paying billions of euros every year to Russia, which, given the fact that they have invaded our neighbor Ukraine and are really endangering the basis of peaceful coexistence in Europe, we really feel like we do not want to pay them a lot of money. So that is obviously a big positive factor. And we are moving long-term to a scenario where we are energy independent, where we can produce the energy we need in our country ourselves instead of paying a lot of money for oil and gas from other countries. We also feel that having been one of the first movers into this field gives us a technological edge. So German car manufacturers are among the best in the world when it comes to building electric vehicles. The only 2 cars you can buy today on the market anywhere where that have the capacity for level 3 autonomous driving come from Mercedes and from BMW. So
Yes.
That's been, a big factor. But at the same time, it's true that it costs a lot of money. So we have had to subsidize the deployment of solar energy for decades. We've had to subsidize the deployment of wind energy to the tune of several hundred billion euros over several decades. So obviously that money must come from somewhere, and but again, looking at the cost of an unmitigated climate crisis, looking at the cost of the flood disasters we've had over the last couple of years in Germany, where whole cities were erased, where hundreds of people died, where we've had very large-scale crop failures, where we've had forest fires. If you look at the costs that the climate crisis is already causing now to our countries, and Germany is less exposed to that than Florida, but even my hometown was flooded this year. I was here in Miami talking with our Minister of Housing, who came here to Miami to study how a city that's lives so close to the ocean copes with sea level rise, and how it tries to be resilient against the climate crisis. So she came here to study that, and 3 weeks later I see photos of her in my old elementary school in my hometown because it was flooded, and so we're all dealing with that cost. And so yes, it's an investment, but we feel it's an investment in our future, and the bottom line is positive.
Yeah, it just happened in Spain now, in
Yes,
Valencia.
exactly, yeah. Look at those pictures,
So,
yeah.
Yes, it's horrible.
What's the cost of
when
that?
you see that, that water is
Yeah,
horrible. The cars were just going by.
yeah.
But yeah,
So it's not, sometimes it feels like it is the economy versus the ecology, or environmentalism versus business interest. But if you look at it from a long-term perspective, it's just good business sense to make those investments now and avoid those terrible costs now and in the future.
and in the future, true. That's true. Thank you very much, Consul General, for this interview. We really appreciate it, and we're going to keep doing them. So it's been a pleasure having you here. I would like to thank Professor Leon Palombo for his participation in this program, and especially Consul General Christofer Burger for always taking time out of his busy schedule to enrich the life of our students, faculty, and staff at Miami-Dade College North Campus. On behalf of the International Education Awareness Month Committee, I hope you have enjoyed this presentation. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure having you here, and we need to repeat this and have several ones.
Yes, with great pleasure. Thank you so much for having me here.
Good.
Thank you for being here.